This is the last photo taken by a group of experienced Russian hikers the night they disappeared in February 1959, here in the remote Ural Mountains in western Siberia. They were on an advanced winter hiking trip, trekking hundreds of kilometers through frozen wilderness.
For over 60 years, the Dyatlov Pass mystery gripped the world with frozen fear. 9 young hikers vanished into the Russian wilderness under conditions no one could explain. Official reports blamed nature, but the evidence told a much darker story. Bodies were found mutilated, barefoot in snow, with radiation no one dared to discuss.
Evening of February 2nd, 1959, a group of 9 skiers led by Igor Dyatlov died near their campsite next to Otorten Mountain in Russia. The horrific state of the campsite was discovered on February 26 by a rescue team.
Decades passed, questions remained, and truth stayed buried beneath ice and silence. But now, in 2025, new discoveries have shattered the lies and exposed what really happened. And this time, the truth isn't just disturbing. It's something we were never meant to know. Into the frozen unknown. In the heart of a brutal Soviet winter, 10 young adventurers set off on what was supposed to be a challenging but thrilling journey. It was January 1959, and the Ural Mountains waited with icy silence.
In January of 1959, a group of 10 young Russian college students set out on a hike through the Ural Mountains in Siberia on a journey of some several hundred miles in total.
At the head of the group was Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student, driven, careful, and deeply respected. He had planned every detail of this ski expedition, right down to the final supply. These weren't reckless tourists. They were skilled, certified by the Sverdlovsk Physical Culture Committee, a group known for training some of the toughest hikers in the Soviet Union. Their destination was Mount Otorten, a remote peak wrapped in snow and old legends. For 16 days, they would brave frozen winds, deep snow, and the kind of cold that drained the soul. Still, their spirits were high. They mapped their route, packed everything they needed, and trained for the worst. But nothing could prepare them for what lay ahead. Just a few days in, one member of the team fell ill. It was a blow, but he turned back while the others pushed on. 9 young men and women, bound by friendship, trust, and a love of adventure, stepped deeper into the mountains. Snow howled around them. The temperatures dropped. Still, they pressed forward. None of them knew this would be their last journey, that the mountain would soon swallow them, not just their bodies, but their story, their truth, and for decades that truth would remain frozen in silence. Silence on Dead Mountain. As days passed, the hikers journeyed deeper into the wild. Snowstorms swept through the Ural Mountains with unforgiving force. The group moved slowly, battling strong winds and knee-deep drifts, but they never lost focus. Their diary entries spoke of jokes, songs, and warm campfires, moments of light in the dark. They were cold, tired, but determined. Then something changed. The group set up camp on the slope of a mountain known to the local Mansi people as Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain. The name alone sent chills, but the hikers didn't fear legends. They pitched their tent on the open slope, choosing a spot high above the tree line. It was a strange decision considering the exposure, but maybe they wanted a challenge. Maybe they trusted their skills too much. When the group failed to return on the scheduled date, families grew anxious. Days turned into weeks. Search teams were finally sent into the frozen wilderness. What they found was beyond comprehension. The hiker's tent was discovered first. It was half buried in snow, slashed open from the inside. Not torn by wind or animals, cut by human hands in a moment of panic. Inside, everything remained. Clothes, boots, food, untouched. As if they had fled in seconds. Bare footprints in the snow led away from the site. No shoes, no jackets, just human tracks that wandered into the trees and vanished. Experienced hikers would never abandon shelter like that, but something had driven them to run, something unknown. And whatever it was, it had already taken hold of them. Shadows in the snow. The searchers followed the tracks through snow that hadn't yet been disturbed by time. Just steps away from the tent, those barefoot prints disappeared into the forest like a vanishing whisper. Then, near a tall cedar tree, they found the first bodies. Two young men, Yuri Krivonishenko and Georgy Doroshenko, lay lifeless, half-naked in the snow. Their skin was pale and frozen, their limbs stiff. No boots, no jackets, just underwear. Nearby, traces of a burnt fire, now long gone cold, hinted at a desperate struggle to survive. One of them had burns on his hands, but oddly, not on his clothes. The other had bitten through his own knuckles, as if trying to feel something, anything, in the numbing cold. More bodies were discovered, scattered between the tree line and the tent. Igor Dyatlov was found face up, fists clenched, as if crawling back to camp. Rustem Slobodin's skull had a crack, yet no external wound. Zenaida Kolmogorova showed signs of blunt force trauma, but again, no wounds from weapons. None of it made sense. These weren't careless hikers. They had trained for cold, for survival. But their actions screamed panic, raw, primal fear. Why would they flee into -30 temperatures without shoes or coats? Why would strong, intelligent people run into the dark, frozen forest like frightened children? Something had snapped inside them. Something had pushed them beyond fear and into madness. And whatever it was, it still wasn't clear. Only one thing was certain. The mountain had claimed them, and it wasn't finished revealing how. The frozen graveyard. Weeks passed before the mountain released its darkest secret. As winter began to loosen its grip, searchers returned with fresh eyes and heavier hearts. About 75 meters beyond the cedar tree, they found the final 4 hikers, but what they discovered shook them to the core. The bodies were deep in a ravine, hidden beneath layers of snow and ice. They weren't just scattered like the others, they were stacked, as if placed on top of one another, and the condition of their bodies? Horrific. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue. Her eye sockets were empty. Her chest had been crushed with incredible force. Yet her skin showed no open wounds. Another hiker, Alexander Kolovatov, had a twisted neck and deformed skull, but no blood. Semyon Zolotaryov's ribs were shattered, as if crushed by an explosion, but his clothes were untouched. Even more strange, Nikolai Thibaut Brignol had a fatal head injury, like he had been hit with a hammer. Yet again, no external damage. The injuries were severe, unnatural, and most importantly, silent. No one heard screams. No one saw a fight. There were no signs of a predator, no defensive wounds, no weapons. Just bodies broken from within, as if something had crushed them invisibly. These weren't accidents. They weren't caused by cold or hunger. They pointed to something much more violent and possibly intelligent. In the middle of nowhere, buried in snow, lay the proof of something terrible. The forest held its breath, the mountain kept its secrets, and the silence screamed louder than ever before. Theories in the ice. When the official investigation ended, it left behind more questions than answers. Authorities offered only a vague explanation, a compelling natural force, but that phrase did nothing to explain crushed ribs, missing eyes, or the panic that drove experienced hikers into the deadly cold. So, the world stepped in. Theories exploded across the globe. Some blamed an avalanche. After all, the tent had been found partially buried in snow. Maybe a sudden collapse forced the group to cut their way out in panic. But experts quickly pointed out the flaws. The slope wasn't steep enough. No clear signs of snow movement were found. And if it were truly an avalanche, why leave warm clothes behind? Then came the idea of infrasound. Scientists proposed that wind sweeping through the mountain's curves could create low-frequency sound waves, ones humans can't hear but can feel. These waves may cause confusion, dread, even physical sickness. Could this invisible pressure have driven them into madness? Yet that didn't explain the broken bones, the burns, or the missing tongue. Others turned to darker explanations. Could the group have stumbled into a secret Soviet military test? The area was known for weapon experiments during the Cold War, and oddly, some of the victims' clothes tested positive for radiation, levels far beyond natural exposure. Still, there were no records, no witnesses, only silence. Each theory offered a piece of the truth, but none gave the full picture. The mystery didn't just survive, it grew deeper and darker. And with every theory, the real story drifted further from reach. Whispers of radiation. As whispers of conspiracy spread, one detail stood out from the rest: radiation. During the first investigation in 1959, examiners noticed something unusual. Several of the hikers' clothes showed traces of radioactive contamination. Not just small amounts, but levels that raised alarms. At the time, Soviet officials rushed to dismiss it. They blamed leftover fallout from known nuclear incidents, especially the 1957 Kishtim disaster, which had poisoned parts of the Ural region. But something didn't add up. The levels were inconsistent with environmental exposure.
In 1957, a massive nuclear accident took place at the top-secret Mayak nuclear station in the Soviet Union. At the time, it was the largest nuclear disaster in history.
And why did only some hikers have contamination on specific pieces of clothing? Decades later, in 2025, a team of nuclear scientists revisited the evidence. Using advanced tools unavailable in the 50s, they analyzed preserved fabric stored deep in military archives. What they found shocked even the skeptics. The isotopes didn't match natural background radiation or the Kishtim event. Instead, they were rare, unstable variants, the kind used in classified military experiments. And even more disturbing, these isotopes decayed rapidly, meaning the contamination likely occurred just before or during the expedition. It wasn't old, it was fresh. The discovery reopened every wound. Was the group exposed during a secret weapons test? Were they unknowingly caught in the middle of something never meant to be seen? And if so, why was nothing ever admitted? The new evidence didn't just point to radiation. It pointed to intentional use, not an accident, not nature, but something made by man, hidden beneath the frost and the lies of history. And for the first time, the truth felt dangerously close. Lights in the sky. As scientists uncovered radioactive clues, others turned to the sky. Strange lights, they said, were seen dancing above the mountains on the night the hikers vanished. Locals from nearby villages, including Mansi tribesmen, described glowing orbs, silent, pulsing, moving unnaturally across the clouds. At first, these reports were ignored. Soviet investigators dismissed them as folklore or tricks of the mind during harsh winter nights. But in 2025, newly restored photographs from the hikers' own cameras revealed something chilling. Hidden within undeveloped film rolls, frozen for decades, was a final photo. The image was blurry, but clear enough to see a bright, circular object in the night sky. Just frames before that, another photo had been mysteriously removed from the reel. The missing frame wasn't due to damage. It was deliberately erased. Who removed it, and why? It raised terrifying questions. Had the hikers captured something they weren't supposed to? Were they being watched? Or worse, hunted? These were no longer distant theories. The hikers were now victims at the center of something far beyond the natural world. And the final photo wasn't just a haunting image, it was a warning, proof that something was out there with them that night. Not just cold, or snow, or fear, but a presence. Whatever happened on that mountain didn't come from just below the surface. It might have come from above, from forces unknown. And for decades, the world looked down, digging through snow. But maybe, all along, the real answers were up in the sky. The sealed container. In March 2025, after years of silence and speculation, the mountain gave up one more secret. A joint expedition, using advanced scanning tools and satellite data, uncovered a buried lead container near the ravine where the last 4 bodies had been found. It was hidden deep beneath rock and permafrost, sealed tight and heavily corroded by time. When the team opened it, what they found rewrote everything. Inside was a Soviet military insignia, faded and torn, a cracked instrument casing, and worst of all, a charred logbook. Its brittle pages had been damaged by heat, but careful preservation revealed its contents. The entries spoke of Operation E-1709, a covert Cold War experiment denied by the Soviet Union for decades. One chilling line stood out: test perimeter compromised. The coordinates matched the exact location of the Dyatlov group's final camp. The dates matched. And the people involved? High-ranking officials from a secret military unit responsible for weapons development. These weren't ghost stories anymore. These were official records. The operation's goal wasn't clear, but the presence of radiation, acoustic tests, and the use of experimental field instruments hinted at something far more dangerous than an avalanche. The hikers had wandered straight into classified military ground, and someone, or something, had been sent to monitor the area. The container had been buried in panic, as if to erase all traces, but it didn't work. After 6 decades of cold silence, the mountain finally spoke, and what it said was darker than anyone had ever imagined. The system that watched them die. Just 1 month after the container was found, a new wave of evidence surfaced, this time from the vaults of Soviet intelligence. A set of declassified documents, stamped and sealed in 1959, confirmed what many had feared all along. The Dyatlov hikers had walked into a live test zone, monitored by military technology far ahead of its time. Surveillance arrays, radio sensors, thermal imaging, they were all in place that night, silently recording. The documents revealed something even more chilling. The group had been watched in real time. Their heart rates, their movements, their body temperatures, every vital sign was tracked as they fled the tent, stumbled through the snow, and died, one by one, in the forest. And yet, no rescue was ever sent, no warning ever given. The system was designed to observe, not intervene. The data showed the moment their bodies gave out, the second their pulses faded. The military saw everything, and they did nothing. Instead, a cover story was created, a natural disaster, an unknown force, a mystery meant to confuse, not explain. Even the 2020 investigation, once thought to be a step toward truth, had been guided by false information, planted decades earlier by those desperate to keep secrets buried. The Dyatlov group wasn't just forgotten, they were sacrificed. Not to nature, not to myth, but to a system that valued secrecy over life, silence over justice. And all this time, the truth wasn't lost. It was hidden on purpose. Avalanche or excuse. Back in 2019, long before the sealed container or the declassified files came to light, Russian authorities reopened the Dyatlov case. Public pressure was mounting. People wanted answers. But what they got in 2020 was a theory that seemed neat. Too neat. The official report claimed it was an avalanche. A slab of snow had collapsed suddenly onto the tent, forcing the hikers to flee into the cold. Some experts backed it, pointing to pressure injuries and buried gear. It sounded logical, maybe even comforting. But there were cracks in the theory, many of them. First, the slope where the tent was pitched wasn't steep enough for a slab avalanche. Second, the search teams had found no obvious signs of one. The tent was still partially standing, not crushed. And what avalanche lets its victims flee barefoot and travel over a mile through freezing snow? Later, scientists at AT Zurich used detailed models to simulate how snow pressure might match the injuries. Their data supported some of the damage, like broken ribs, but the models failed to explain the missing eyes, severed tongue, or radiation. Nor could they explain why several hikers were found undressed, scattered, and suffering from strange, surgical-like wounds. The avalanche theory gave people closure, but not the truth. It felt like an excuse. A way to silence questions, to tie up a mystery with a ribbon of science while ignoring everything that didn't fit. But the Dyatlov story never fit neatly into science. And nature, brutal as it is, rarely leaves behind lies. The unnatural evidence. As more pieces of the puzzle surfaced, one thing became painfully clear. This was no ordinary tragedy. Every new clue only deepened the unease. Something unnatural had happened, something that didn't follow the laws of weather, wildlife, or logic. The physical evidence refused to line up. The hikers' bodies showed internal trauma, broken ribs, fractured skulls, and crushed chests, without any external wounds. Medical experts called it blunt force damage, but no weapon had been found. No animal could inflict such precision without tearing flesh. Some injuries looked like they came from a car crash, not the wilderness. Then there were the missing body parts. Tongues, eyes, pieces of skin, removed with almost surgical precision. These weren't the random tears of predators. There were no bite marks, no signs of feeding. It looked deliberate. And the placement of the bodies. Some were found far from the tent, in odd positions, climbing trees, crawling toward nothing, or huddled in silence. Their clothing was found scattered, sometimes worn by others, as if they tried to share warmth. But the decisions made during those final hours didn't match their training, their logic, or their instincts. Every angle of the scene told a story of panic and confusion, but not without order. Something had terrified them, drive them out, shattered their reason. And yet, no theory, no avalanche, no wind, no wildlife could fully explain it. They were prepared for the cold. They were ready for hardship. But what came for them wasn't part of nature. It was something else entirely. The radioactive trail. For decades, radiation remained the most ignored but unsettling clue. Some brushed it off as coincidence. Others feared what it might mean. But in 2025, with new technology and a determined team of nuclear forensic scientists, the truth began to surface, and it was more terrifying than imagined. They examined fragments of clothing preserved in sealed archives, using isotope mapping techniques far beyond anything the Soviets had in 1959. What they found was not natural background radiation and not leftovers from the Kishtim disaster as once claimed. It was far more specific and far more sinister. The radioactive particles embedded in the hikers' clothing were short-lived isotopes, rare, exotic, and unstable. These materials weren't found in nature. They were used in secret radiological weapons testing, designed to disable or kill silently, without a trace. Their presence on the hikers' gear couldn't be random. The contamination wasn't old, it had occurred right before or during the expedition. Worse still, 2 of the victims had indirect ties to military projects and fallout zones. At first, this looked like a coincidence, but after this discovery, it seemed more like a warning left behind, a fingerprint the government tried to smudge away. The conclusion was no longer just theory. These weren't campers caught in a storm. They were exposed to classified military-grade radiation, not by accident, but by design. And for over 60 years, someone kept that secret buried deep in the snow, trusting that time would erase the truth. But now the snow had melted, and the truth was glowing. Eyes to the sky. As scientists decoded radiation on the ground, others turned their focus upward, to the sky. and the last silent witnesses of that night. The hikers' cameras. Recovered from the campsite, the damaged film rolls were long thought unreadable. But in 2025, digital restoration changed everything. For the first time, the final photos were brought to life, and what they revealed stunned everyone. One of the last frames captured a bright, pulsing object in the night sky, hovering silently above the mountains. It wasn't a star. It wasn't the moon. Its shape was unnatural, circular, glowing, in motion. Even more disturbing was the discovery that another frame had been removed, not damaged, deliberately cut from the reel. Why? This wasn't just bad luck or camera failure. Someone had tried to erase something, a moment, a clue. And the hikers weren't the only ones who saw it. That same night, Mansi locals had reported glowing lights in the sky, strange movements they'd never seen before. At the time, those warnings were dismissed as myths or hallucinations, but now, they looked like missed alarms. Were the lights connected to secret weapons? Or something not of this world? No one could say for sure, but the photographic evidence added a new layer of fear. The sky had not been silent that night. It had watched it, maybe even followed. And as the hikers ran barefoot into the cold darkness, perhaps they weren't running from the mountain. Perhaps they were running from the sky, buried in deception. Just when it seemed the truth had reached its end, the final blow came, not from nature or radiation or skies, but from declassified government files. In April 2025, documents hidden deep within Soviet intelligence archives were exposed, and they shattered the final layer of silence. These papers confirmed the existence of a secret military testing zone, one that the Dyatlov group had unknowingly entered. The files described experiments involving radiological dispersal and acoustic warfare, technologies meant to disrupt the human body without visible wounds. They spoke of frequencies that could induce panic, confusion, even death. They mentioned test zones rigged with remote biometric monitors, capable of tracking heart rates and body temperatures from a distance. The most chilling detail? The hikers were watched until the moment they died. Their final moments were recorded in cold numbers, body heat dropping, heartbeats slowing, and not once was help sent. There were no alerts, no rescues, only observation. It was never an accident. It was never a mystery of nature. It was an experiment, a live field test where 9 innocent hikers became data points. What followed was a carefully constructed lie, a scripted narrative, military agents posing as rescuers, evidence hidden, autopsies edited. The term compelling natural force was invented not to explain, but to cover up. And for 66 years, the world believed it. But now, that curtain of deception has finally fallen. The Dyatlov group didn't die because they were unprepared. They died because someone let them. The truth in the ice. After decades of rumors, lies, and silence, the truth has finally clawed its way out of the snow. The Dyatlov Pass tragedy was never a tale of misfortune. It was a story of sacrifice, hidden beneath layers of ice and government secrets. They weren't careless. They weren't caught by a storm. They were trapped inside a live military experiment, watched in real time, and left to die in the cold. Their injuries, too clean, too brutal, weren't caused by nature. The radiation, the mutilations, the panic, none of it was accidental. Every clue pointed to one fact: they were expendable. The 2025 revelations, sealed containers, classified documents, isotope evidence, erased photographs, weren't just answers, they were confessions. Proof that a system once swore to protect its people, instead used them for data, for silence, for control. The hikers, 9 young souls full of hope and adventure, died not because they failed, but because they stumbled into something they were never meant to see. And for 66 years, the world was fed myths, avalanche theories, hypothermia claims, infrasound stories, all designed to mislead. Now the truth is no longer buried. It stands, exposed, cold, cruel, undeniable. But one question remains. Why did it take so long? Maybe because some truths are too dangerous. Maybe because silence serves power. Or maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't ready. But now you know, and the mountain no longer holds the secret alone. The Dyatlov hikers didn't just vanish into the snow. They were erased on purpose. Hashtag. What began as a hiking trip became a tale the world wasn't meant to hear. For decades, the truth froze in silence, buried beneath snow and secrets. But now, the voices of the lost speak louder than ever. This wasn't a tragedy of nature, it was a betrayal, crafted in the dark. Their story was never about getting lost, it was about being erased. And as the final veil lifts, we're left staring at a system colder than the mountain itself. The Dyatlov mystery is no longer a question, it's a warning.